All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Hawk Droppings. This episode's a little special. I'm going to do something a little different with this one, which I will explain momentarily. But we had some really good news today. Today is Thursday, June 6th. And we learned this morning that Steve Bannon is finally going to prison. He was convicted, I think, on 2 counts, 2 felonies. For refusal to comply with a congressional subpoena that he received from the January 6th committee. Just ignored it, didn't respond at all, didn't produce any documents, didn't respond for questioning or show up for questioning, didn't even show up just to plead the Fifth Amendment, assert his Fifth Amendment rights. If he had done that, he would not be going to prison. But he just ignored it entirely. He relied mainly on a defense of advice of counsel, saying that his attorney had advised him that he could simply ignore a valid, legal, proper subpoena from the United States House of Representatives. So really great advice there. Amazingly, the attorney who gave him that advice, the attorney who was representing him at that time and told him, you can completely ignore this subpoena, that attorney's name was Robert Costello, who coincidentally was the only witness that Donald Trump's defense team called in their case in the criminal trial that wrapped up a week ago today. And you will all remember how well Mr. Costello's testimony went. He behaved like such a complete disrespectful jackass that the judge cleared the courtroom and told Mr. Costello that he was going to hold him in contempt and throw him in a jail cell if he didn't chill out and show at least a little bit of respect for the court and for the jury. Again, another connection. I saw video and photos today of Steve Bannon entering and exiting the courthouse when he threw his little temper tantrum. And one of the attorneys representing him was a gentleman named Evan Corcoran. Evan Corcoran, for a period of time at least, was Donald Trump's lead attorney as it relates to the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case until it became known that Donald Trump had lied to Evan Corcoran about classified documents at Mar-a-Lago and had sought to get had tried to get Evan Corcoran to unknowingly lie to the government about those documents. It was those interactions which crashed the attorney-client privilege between Donald Trump and Evan Corcoran he ended up having to testify against his own client, Donald Trump, at the grand jury that was convened by Jack Smith in the Mar-a-Lago documents case. And now he's apparently one of Steve Bannon's attorneys as well. So Steve Bannon has really pulled together a crack legal team right up there with the legal team that Donald Trump had for his criminal trial that wrapped up last week. It's just a giant incestuous mess of felons and shitty lawyers. The whole thing is. Steve Bannon, so he got sentenced to 4 months in prison. He's got to report no later than July 1st to go spend 4 months in prison. And he has one of the highest rated MAGA podcasts out there. He broadcasts several hours live per day, pretty much. He's on the air for like 3 hours a day. So he was convicted about a year and a half ago, wanted to remain free pending his appeal, rather than just serve his 4 months and get it over with. So now that his appeal was resoundingly rejected by the DC Court of Appeals, that happened within the last couple of weeks. Now it's time to go to jail. If you are free pending appeal and your appeal ends not in your favor and you got a 4 months jail cell or a jail sentence hanging over your head, it's time to go to prison. And so, of course, Bannon and everybody on the right, the timing on this is freaking amazing because he's showing up July 1st to serve 4 months, the host of one of the most listened to MAGA podcasts in the entire country. which means he's going to be off the air for July, August, September, and October. Election day is November 5th. So he really kind of cornholed himself here. This isn't the judge's fault. This isn't the prosecutor's fault. This is just the way the timing worked out with the Court of Appeals. So for the 4 months leading up to Election Day, Steve Bannon's podcast is going to be off the air. And that's outstanding for him. All right. So what am I doing differently with this episode? I have a Coffee with Hawk episode that I'm going to record as well. And so I actually had 2 of those to do today. So I thought I would do this one as a Hawk Droppings episode so that everybody can kind of get an idea of what I do in the Coffee with Hawk episodes. Just, a preview for folks, because the audio for Hawk Droppings is free for everybody. And what I usually do on Coffee with Hawk, that's usually a 20, 25-minute episode that I do twice a week. And it's just a recap of news stories that I think are important or interesting or not getting enough cover, or that I just want to talk about, or that involve people that I just want to laugh at, like Steve Bannon. So that's what today's Hawk Droppings is going to be. Steve Bannon immediately came out to the microphone upon hearing the news that he's going to prison. And he's like, I want to say something specifically about the Justice Department. They are not going to shut up Trump. They're not going to shut up Peter Navarro. They're not going to shut up Bannon. And they're certainly not going to shut up MAGA. They're not trying to shut any of you guys up. They're just trying to put you guys in prison because you're all felons. There's nothing they can do to shut me up, and nothing will shut me up. There's no prison or jail that will ever shut me up. You cannot shut me up. I think we get the idea, Steve. All victory to MAGA. We're going to win at the Supreme Court, and more importantly, we're going to win on November 5th in an amazing landslide with the Senate, the House, and Donald J. Trump back as president of the United States. Enjoy your 4 months in prison, Steve. Then we move on to Republicans in general having an absolute meltdown that Steve Bannon, who was convicted of 2 felonies and sentenced to 4 months in prison, is actually going to have to serve the 4 months in, okay, whatever. It's with great sadness and anger that we observe the death of the judicial system in America, wrote Matt Gaetz. Steve Bannon sought judicial review of the illegal demands of a runaway congressional committee unlike any ever comprised. And they're sending him to prison, not just to torture him, but to torture us. Because a day without Steve Bannon is torture for Matt Gaetz. Marjorie Taylor Greene blamed the fake January 6th committee that was set up by Nancy Pelosi. The DOJ is corrupt, completely corrupt, she exclaimed. Turning Point's founder, Charlie Kirk, claimed Bannon's jail time was an effort to stop him from participating in the 2024 election. All of July, all of August, all of September, all of October, they're effectively taking Steve Bannon out of this election. That is what this is all about. They're trying to take Steve Bannon out of this election. This is orchestrated. It is coordinated. This is a desperate regime that is trying to take out one of the most important voices. That being the voice of bathtub meth impresario Steve Bannon. Polling suggests that prison time for Trump would sway voters. Hey, great. I'm happy to hear that one of the major presidential candidates, if he's in prison, that might affect voters' willingness to vote for that candidate. Voters who lean toward Mr. Trump may well conclude that having to check with a probation officer periodically won't impede his performance as commander-in-chief. Prison is different. The reality is that most voters are not anticipating that Mr. Trump will actually face incarceration. In my data, only 1 in 5 thinks he's likely to get prison time, and most of those are already Biden voters. It isn't hard to imagine a voter who isn't crazy about Mr. Trump, but leans towards voting for him, who thinks the trial and the verdict itself were much ado about nothing, yet when confronted with the prospect of voting for a man who has been sentenced to prison, they might have a strong reaction. North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, who no one's ever heard of before, but unlike Donald Trump, somebody who is actually a billionaire, former presidential candidate and wealthy businessman, is actively campaigning to be Trump's VP pick. He made the pilgrimage to the Manhattan courthouse a few times. He's been helping with fundraiser and donor outreach, something that has not gone unnoticed by Donald Trump. Said one observer, Trump likes people who are rich and who have hot wives. So right there, that's the criteria now to be vice president of the United States. Vladimir Putin's existential problem, he doesn't have enough Russians. One challenge to how he portrays himself. Russia's population has been in decline for years, and the war in Ukraine has made matters worse. At least 150,000 Russians are dead on the battlefield. A couple of 100,000 more are wounded and out of commission, according to Western estimates. Roughly 1 million military-age men fled the country after the war began. The number of births is at its lowest in more than 2 decades, and bigger than average drops in babies born in some regions closest to the fight. So he's having an incredibly hard time replacing the grist for his meat grinder. That is the war in Ukraine. What a fucking mess, man. Paul Gosar, he's a congressman from Arizona who very clearly has some type of significant neurological disorder. I'll leave it at that. He's unwell physically and mentally. He has filed a bill for the U.S. Treasury to issue a $500 bill with Donald Trump's portrait on it. Speaking of mental illness, Donald Trump's guilty verdict could impact his travel. Trump is scheduled to be sentenced on July 11, and the result may determine if he's allowed to leave the U.S. and enter other countries as a convicted felon. Proving that his only loyalty is to money, just like his father-in-law, Jared Kushner is working on an investment deal, a development deal with the Serbian government and the hedge fund that he is in charge of, which is funded by $2 billion of Saudi Arabian money, has pledged to construct a memorial dedicated to all of the victims of NATO aggression. That's us. That's the United States. Okay, yeah. Jared Kushner's a piece of shit and a vampire. The state of New York is preparing to revoke Donald Trump's gun carry permit because he's a convicted felon. I mean, not that fat slob has ever carried a gun, but it's just funny. It's just funny. All of these J6 defendants that are getting convicted of felonies can no longer own firearms. Donald Trump is a convicted felon, can no longer own firearms, and can't carry a handgun anymore. It's fantastic. Senate Republicans today decided that people in the United States of America really shouldn't have protected access to birth control. So, they're all on record as voting against protecting your rights to contraception. And I love that 5 months before Election Day. The appeals court in Georgia has put a stop on Donald Trump's RICO trial there. They're hearing the appeal on whether or not to disqualify Fani Willis. And the appellate court just, at the lower court level, that appeal was working its way up. And the trial court judge was like, that appeal is in process, but we're going to keep moving ahead procedurally with this case. Yesterday, the appellate court said, no, you're not. Everything is stayed until our appeal is done. And which is bullshit, but whatever. It's Georgia, and all of those judges were appointed by Republicans. Trump complains that during his jury trial, the jurors didn't smile at him. He believes that was very unfair. I mean, he never saw a glimmer of a smile from the jury. Trump said, you heard me say long before the verdict that Mother Teresa couldn't get a fair trial here. I said that, and no, you couldn't. I never saw a glimmer of a smile from this jury. No, this was a venue that was very unfair. It was very unfair. It was a venue in which prosecutors had overwhelming evidence that you committed 34 felonies. Oh, God, this fucking guy. Black Republican congressman from Florida, Byron Donalds, whose wife is white, has tremendous concerns about Black families and expressed his belief that Black families did much better under Jim Crow than from like 1965 and beyond. He's getting rightfully dragged all over the place for that. He is a garbage human being. I saw somebody in the comments of somebody else's video on this. It was an African American gentleman who commented that Byron Donalds is the kind of guy who, during the days of slavery, he would have turned in people. He would have turned in slaves who tried to escape. And I think that's probably accurate. Republicans, we haven't heard much about Joe Biden's weaponized Department of Justice this week. Why might that be? Because Joe Biden's weaponized Department of Justice has put Joe Biden's son, Hunter, his only surviving son, on trial for 3 felonies for which Hunter Biden could face 25 years in prison. Joe Biden was asked about that today in Europe. He's over there for the D-Day anniversary. A reporter asked him if he would ever consider issuing a pardon for his son, and he said, "No, I will respect the verdict of this jury." Joe Biden could fire that special prosecutor at any given moment, and he has not done it. Joe Biden could have stopped all of this by issuing a pardon for his son, and he has not done that. He said today that he will not issue a pardon for his son. How the fuck is the Department of Justice now weaponized against Republicans when it is prosecuting Joe Biden's only surviving son? Donald Trump's base are the stupidest people I've ever encountered in my entire life. Stupid and gullible. Stupid, gullible, loud, angry, which makes them sound even stupider than they already are. So, with a few days ago, the Wall Street Journal they published an article. Behind closed doors, Biden shows signs of slipping. And it's like everybody in the media was like, "Oh, this sounds serious." It's like, "Oh, we need to take this seriously." And the article got all kinds of coverage, all kinds of airplay. It changed all kinds of narratives until some reporters dug in and realized that every single source cited in the article, every single one, were Republicans, only 2 of whom were willing to go on the record, Mike Johnson with something vague, and Kevin McCarthy, whose quotes in that article are completely contradicted by quotes from him at the time of the events that took place that he's describing in this article. So I think it's very clear that Rupert Murdoch timed the release of this article, which I think came out on Friday or Saturday. They timed the publishing of this article to coincide with Donald Trump's guilty verdict in Manhattan. Quote of the day from James Carville, who's a crusty old fuck who is completely out of touch with society these days, but I think this is some valuable advice. And he's a total misogynist, too. James Carville is a total misogynist. But he says the following: the Democrats should run against MAGA. MAGA is less popular than Trump. We need a lot of people who voted for Trump, and not all of them are MAGAs. A lot of them have different reasons. We need some of those people to vote for Biden. And if we can drive a wedge between MAGA and those non-MAGA people, we could get some blah, 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 blah. And MAGA has an approval rating at 24%. Trump's at 42%. And it's like, Trump's at 42%. How? Jesus. Anyway, I thought that was some decent advice. So, New Jersey Senate Democrat, another victim of Joe Biden's weaponized Department of Justice. He's on trial right now for bribery and corruption and corrupting his office. He's the one where they found gold bars in his closet and all of his clothes stuffed with wads of $100 bills. And his wife's driving a brand new Mercedes that neither one of them paid for, kind of thing. And as part of building the case, here's one thing that the FBI did. So Bob Menendez, his wife, and a group of people were out to dinner with some Egyptians, and that's who he was allegedly corrupting his office on behalf of. And the restaurant they were at, there was a couple who had arrived late, appeared to be on a date. The woman was wearing a black dress, and during the meal, her date, the man moved around their table and used his camera to snap her photo and was taking a lot of pictures of her. But in reality, the couple were members of an FBI surveillance team, and they had sat deliberately right next to Mr. Menendez and his group. In a massive about face. I mean, for the last 8 years, what has Donald Trump been railing against? Voting by mail. Because voting by mail is how all of the fraud happened. That's all the fraud that happened in 2020 was from voting by mail. Well, now the RNC and Donald Trump are launching a brand new vote by mail campaign, encouraging people to vote by mail. And they made the genius move of naming this push Swamp the Vote. That's the best name they could come up with for this. It's like, it's like these people sit around licking windows and eating crayons all day. I swear to God, said Trump in a new video. Many Republicans like to vote on Election Day, and we must swamp the radical Democrats with massive turnout on Tuesday, November 5th. The way you win is to swamp them. If we swamp them, they can't cheat. It just doesn't work out. But if you can't make it, you need to make a plan and register and vote any way possible. So now he's a big fan of vote by mail, whatever. And it's funny that he's doing this with the RNC because he has taken all of the RNC's money to pay his legal fees and is taking all of their incoming money to pay his legal fees as well. And because Joe Biden is not siphoning all of the money away from the DNC, the DCCC, the DSCC, and every other Democrat in the country, because he's not, facing 3 more criminal trials, the Democrats actually have money to spend on campaigns, and they are pouring millions and millions of dollars into down ballot races, including House and Senate races, and into multi-million-dollar efforts to flip or hold state legislative chambers in Arizona, Michigan, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. That's what you can do when your lead candidate is not a felon and a thief and an adulterer. There's that. Here's the funny thing about that vote on birth control that I just talked about. So that vote was coming up in the Senate. Every senator who showed up voted against it. The National Republican Senatorial Committee 3 days ago directed candidates to clearly outline their support for policies that increase access to birth control. That's the Republican organization that's responsible for getting Republicans elected to the Senate. And they said, don't vote against this, you fucking potatoes. And every Republican who showed up voted against it. Yeah. Here's some polling that I think I'm going to skip the headline on this. Some polling that I think you will be absolutely shocked when you hear. In April, 17% of Republicans said that convicted felons should be allowed to be president. In polling taken after Donald Trump's conviction last week, 58% of Republicans said that convicted felons should be allowed to be president. A 41-point swing over 2 months. The Colorado Republican Party has marked the beginning of Pride Month with a mass email attacking members of the LGBTQ community as godless groomers and a social media campaign calling for all pride flags to be set on fire. So if you're in Colorado and you're hearing this, pick your favorite male Republican in the state of Colorado, and please, please, please find their Grindr profile and share it with all of us, because they have them. That one I don't care about. Mike Johnson's going to take on the justice system. Mike Johnson's a dick. The RNC website in some promo stuff for the Milwaukee convention that's coming up on July 15th, 4 days after Donald Trump's sentencing on 34 felonies. They're having the National Republican Convention in Milwaukee. The convention's website features a banner with an image of Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, also known as Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's just like, how is this even a political party anymore? How is this even still? I don't even understand. I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't get it. I don't get it. Donald Trump says he has every right to prosecute his political rivals when he's reelected, if he's reelected. Spoiler alert, he's not going to be reelected. Uh, he he told Fox News that seeking prosecutions of his political opponents would be wrong, but he has every right to do so if he's reelected. And it's easy because it's Joe Biden, and you see all of the criminality. Yes, all of the criminality of Joe Biden. And here's the amazing thing. There was a slightly awkward moment today in Europe, in France. You know, all of the European leaders are there. They're all there celebrating the anniversary of D-Day. And Joe Biden, you know, he did what Joe Biden does. There was some awkward little movement, and I kid you not, within an hour of that happening, all social media platforms were flooded with Republicans and conservative podcast hosts. All of them were saying that Joe Biden shit his pants on stage in Europe, which clearly did not happen. But yet, Donald Trump has people showing up to his rallies literally with golden diapers and holding flags and wearing shirts that say, "Real men wear diapers." So if Joe Biden did shit himself in Europe, does that make him a real man in the eyes of MAGA? Because that's what their guy does. He shits himself all the time. Oh, we're heading into some dark times, kids. The next 5 months, I know I keep saying this, the next 5 months are going to suck, and the body count is not going to be zero. We are heading into, I joke about it a lot, but we are heading into an extremely dangerous period of time for this country. I do believe that there will be multiple incidents of lone wolf political violence, which will be executed in the way that the MAGA chuds execute everything. But it's not a good time. Everybody keeps telling us that we're living through history, and it's shitty history, and I'm very tired of living through shitty history. So it's Thursday evening. Tomorrow is Friday. I hope everybody gets a great start to their weekend. I hope everybody has a fun and safe weekend. Don't get arrested, and I'll see you on the other side.